Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a world lit by trembling gold, an age when silence hummed louder than speech, and a single flame could mean salvation or damnation. You stand at the edge of a damp medieval monastery, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and cold stone. Candles gutter in iron sconces, and somewhere in the cloister you hear the faint shuffle of sandals across flagstones. You're about to meet the monks who guarded light as if it were memory itself. Their world is built on ritual, patience, and fear of the dark, because if that one sacred candle ever dies, so might the soul of the world. You probably won't survive this night without a shiver. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step through the heavy oak doors, and the cold meets you like a damp handshake. The air smells of smoke, wax, and the faint sweetness of honey. The abbey is older than memory, its stones blackened from centuries of candle soot. A novice monk glides past, carrying a brass lantern as though it were a newborn. His face is pale, and his lips move silently, reciting some invisible vow. He's one of the candle keepers, brothers sworn to guard flame as a relic of divine memory. They believe the light was first given by God himself, a shard of the original fire that sparked creation. Losing it would mean losing the thread back to heaven. So day and night they tend the candles in shifts. Some scrape wax drippings into molds. Others keep watch with snuffers and flints, ready to save or rekindle a dying wick. They move like shadows between pools of light, their eyes half closed in prayer. Historians still argue whether such dedicated light orders actually existed, or if later chroniclers folded bits of monastic practice into legend. But there's evidence, in old charters and wax seals, that at least a few abbeys assigned brothers to custodia lucis, the guardianship of sacred flame. The idea was simple yet terrifying. If the holy fire ever went out, humanity might stumble into spiritual darkness. You pause near the refectory, where dinner has long ended. The candles here burn low, their stubs pooling into soft golden puddles. Each flame flickers like a heartbeat, alive yet dying. One monk leans close and trims a wick with tiny scissors, murmuring a psalm. He doesn't look up. You realize that for them, every movement is part of devotion, each breath measured, so it won't disturb the flame. The abbot once told a traveler, "Our God lives between wax and breath." It sounded poetic until you see how seriously they take it. No one laughs here. Even the novices speak in whispers, fearing their breath could offend the light. Still, the monastery isn't all reverence and gloom. There's the quiet comedy of wax accidents. A brother who accidentally dips his sleeve into molten beeswax and must peel it off like armor. Another who sneezes mid-prayer and nearly extinguishes the altar lamp, an event recorded with solemn horror in the scriptorium. The chronicler wrote, "Brother Hugo's nose did threaten the covenant of light." You make your way toward the Sanctum Lucis, the room of light. The door is carved with suns, flames, and what looks suspiciously like early fire icons. Tiny faces drawn inside tons of flame. Inside, the air glows amber, alive with dozens of candles arranged in geometric patterns. The keepers say the layout mirrors the order of heaven itself. 7 great candles for the virtues, 12 smaller ones for the apostles, and one single flame in the center, the Memoria Dei, the memory of God. Every dawn, they relight every candle in the abbey from that central wick. It's their heartbeat. You stand close and feel the warmth tickle your face. You think about electricity, how easily you flip a switch now, and feel almost guilty. These monks built entire lives around the act of protecting something you forget in seconds. A senior monk approaches, his hands folded within his robe sleeves. "You breathe too loud," he says softly. You freeze. Then he smiles faintly, humor hidden like a spark. "It's all right," he adds. We were all loud once. He shows you the wax workshop, where apprentices mix beeswax with salt and crushed herbs to purify it. The process smells heavenly, like sunlit meadows buried under stone. He tells you they believe bees are holy creatures, tiny alchemists who turn sunlight into worship. We are only their imitators, he says. You notice a small soot-stained book on the shelf, Liber Flammarum, Book of Flames. Inside, drawings of candle types, spiral, twisted, triple-wicked, each labeled with a purpose: healing, prayer, remembrance. One note in the margin claims a candle blessed on Easter could cure melancholy if burned beside one's bed. Fringe belief, the monk admits, but we never rule out the small miracles. He gestures to a thick door at the far end of the hall. That leads below, he says, to the vault where we bury the candles that have served their time. You think he's joking, but his face doesn't move. Nothing that has carried the light is ever discarded, he adds quietly. Outside, rain patters against stained glass. The flames tremble but never die. One of the brothers reaches up and steadies a candle with both hands, as if soothing a frightened animal. Another passes behind him, carrying a fresh wick like a torch of lineage. In this place, time is measured not in hours but in inches of melted wax. You imagine centuries of monks repeating this ritual, lighting, guarding, whispering, believing that memory itself might live in flame. Maybe that's why the abbey feels half alive, like a sleeping creature that breathes through every candle. The air vibrates softly, a harmony of flickers and sighs, and as you watch, you start to sense what they feel. That this fragile light, so easily snuffed, might be all that stands between humanity and the dark beyond the walls. You stay in that amber hush a long time, the air breathing around you in rhythm with the wicks. Each flame seems to pulse. Inhale, exhale, inhale again, as if the whole abbey were a lung of light. The monks call this spiritus lucis, the breath of light. They believe it's more than metaphor, that the flame is literally divine breath trapped in wax. You find that hard to swallow, but the warmth against your cheek almost feels alive, like someone's palm hovering near your skin. They tell you each candle begins as an act of confession. Before melting the wax, the brothers chant the litany of sins, pride, envy, wrath, then pour them symbolically into the pot. The burning becomes both penance and purification. Light remembers everything, says Brother Eamon, a monk so old his voice sounds like a moth's wings. But in fire, memory softens, it forgives. You watch him dip a wick into the melted beeswax again and again, building up layers until it thickens into a smooth taper. He hums as he works, an old melody that sounds half lullaby, half lament. The candle takes hours to form, and by the end you understand why he calls it a slow prayer. Historians still argue whether monks truly regarded candle making as sacramental labor or simply as part of monastic routine. Some think later romantics exaggerated it, mistaking poetic language in monastic manuals for mystical belief. But archaeological finds, like the wax-coated crucibles unearthed at Fountains Abbey, suggest these rituals were more than symbolic. Each act of creation had a whisper of the sacred in it. Brother Eamon shows you how to test a wick. He lights it briefly, studies the flame's color, then pinches it out. Too yellow, he mutters, too greedy. He trims it shorter, relights. Ah, now it prays, not screams. You almost laugh, but his face is dead serious. There's affection in the way he watches it burn, as though checking a child's pulse. He leads you to a small alcove where an oil lamp glows instead of a candle. That, he explains, is the lamp of remembrance. It burns for the dead. The oil is thick and smells faintly of olives. He says the flame feeds on names written on parchment hidden beneath it. When the lamp gutters, he says, a name fades from memory. You glance at the base. Hundreds of small curls of parchment, brown with age. It's hard not to imagine one of them carries yours. Wax here is theology in solid form. To the candle keepers, the body of the candle is matter, fragile, corruptible. The flame is spirit, bright, pure, ascending. When they melt together, that's incarnation, the divine within the flesh. It's shockingly poetic for men who eat boiled lentils and rarely speak. And yet, there's humor here too. Brother Eamon recalls the novice who carved his candle with a smiley face to cheer the Virgin. He was banned from the workshop for a week. Another once melted his candle so thin it resembled a noodle, nicknamed Saint Spaghetti ever after. God loves our clumsiness, Eamon says, grinning. He made enough of it. You ask him whether they ever let the candles burn down fully. He shakes his head. Never. We snuff them first. If a candle dies on its own, it takes something with it. He doesn't say what that something is, and you don't ask. Later, as dusk creeps through the cloisters, the monks gather in the chapel for vespers. You join the line, feeling the floor chill through your boots. Each brother carries a candle, unlit. The abbot holds the Memoria Dei flame, its light trembling like a living creature. One by one, he touches it to theirs, and each wick catches. The chapel slowly brightens, not with brilliance, but with warmth. You watch shadows shrink from the walls. The chant begins, low and steady. Latin phrases weave through the air. Lumen vitae, lumen cordis. Light of life, light of the heart. The melody feels endless, like breathing underwater. You catch yourself swaying slightly. The abbot raises his candle, and the others follow. The air turns gold. For a moment, you think you see shapes in the smoke. Faces, maybe, or memories. The human brain loves to invent ghosts. But still, you can't shake the idea that you're standing in a living archive of light. Each candle a memory. Each wick a whisper of someone who once refused to let the dark win. The monks insist that the candle doesn't just symbolize divine presence, it is divine presence. When the wax melts and disappears, that's not death, but transformation. The light, they claim, returns to its maker. One scholar in the 13th century, Abbot Giraldus of Clermont, wrote, "The soul is a flame, the body its candle. In both, the end is the beginning." His writings were later condemned as heretical mysticism, though modern theologians quietly adore him for it. You notice one candle burning with strange steadiness, its flame unnaturally still despite the draught. Brother Eamon says those are called listening candles. The belief is that if a flame holds perfectly still, a saint is near. You both stare, breathless, waiting for it to flicker. It doesn't. He approves, Eamon whispers, smiling faintly. Outside, night deepens. The bell tolls once, slow and heavy. The monks extinguish their candles in unison, lowering the room into velvet dark. The scent of hot wax lingers, mingled with human breath and faith so thick you could almost touch it. You think of how, even now, humanity still measures hope in light. Birthday candles, vigil lamps, glowing phone screens in the night, all small rebellions against darkness. Maybe those monks weren't wrong at all. Maybe every flicker we make is a tiny act of memory, a quiet insistence that we were here, and we still remember the warmth. The nights in the abbey are thick and soundless, like being inside a closed mouth. The corridors breathe faintly, stone inhaling, wax exhaling. You're told that after Compline, no one speaks. The silence is so strict you start to hear things that may not exist. The hiss of a guttering wick, the faint shuffle of robes somewhere below. That's when you realize the candle keepers never truly sleep. You wander by lamplight through the nave, the floor glowing faintly from scattered puddles of moonlight. You pass through a low archway and into the cloister garden. There, under the watch of a half-moon, a single candle burns inside a glass lantern. It shouldn't be there. The rules say all flames must rest in the chapel after dusk. Yet this one trembles in the open air as if defying God. A shadow moves nearby. "You shouldn't be out here," whispers a voice. It's Brother Marcus, a younger monk with the kind of eyes that belong to men who ask too many questions. He tells you the story of the secret fires, flames the abbey hides from the abbot, lit not for worship but for fear. The old rule says if the central flame dies, he murmurs, the world ends in darkness. So we keep a few reserves. Historians still argue whether medieval monks ever believed in a world-ending flame. Some think it was symbolic of spiritual vigilance. Others say it was genuine apocalypse anxiety. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere between faith and paranoia. Still, the idea that the monks feared cosmic extinction by candlelight has a strange beauty to it. Brother Marcus lifts the lantern and the flame throws amber halos across his face. "We call them vigil fires," he says. "Hidden hearts. One in the orchard, one in the scriptorium, one below the crypt stairs. So if ever the sanctum's light fails, memory won't die with it." You follow him through a side passage that smells of damp parchment and beeswax. The stairs spiral downward, each step sighing with centuries. At the bottom is a narrow chamber lined with alcoves, tiny altars where lamps flicker like nervous thoughts. Their light moves over walls carved with strange sigils, circles, crosses, suns, eyes. Marcus says they're breath marks, a kind of mnemonic code the old monks used to map prayers. Each curve, he says, tells you how long to breathe while tending the flame. He stops before a low doorway and hands you a taper. "Go on," he says. "Keep it alive." You cup your hand around the tiny light and step through. The air inside is cold and smells of dust and something sweeter, lavender maybe, or old honey. You see a table with glass jars filled with ash. Marcus explains that every time a candle dies, they collect the ash and mix it into new wax. "Memory feeding memory," he says softly. "Nothing truly ends." You almost joke that it sounds like spiritual recycling, but his expression stops you. To him, it's sacred law. The abbey's light must be unbroken, generation after generation, flame reborn from its own remains. On the far wall hangs a wooden plaque painted with a single Latin phrase, "Si lux cadit, homo cadit." If the light falls, man falls. Beneath it sits a locked chest. Marcus opens it just enough to show what's inside, a bundle of old, half-melted candles, their wicks fused together like bones. "These," he says, "are the relics of near failures." You touch one and feel how soft the wax still is, as if it remembers its last warmth. For a moment, you picture the night it nearly went out, the panic, the monks sprinting through corridors with torches, praying, sweating, tripping over robes. He tells you about the night of the Ashen Moon, when a storm struck the abbey in 1273. Lightning shattered the bell tower, and rain flooded the chapel. The Memoria Dei candle flickered so hard it split its own wax in two. The brothers believed it was a test. God's breath versus nature's fury. They built a human wall around the flame, using their own bodies to shield it. Only one monk dared to move, running to fetch a glass dome from the library. He covered the flame just as a gust roared through. The abbey survived. The monk, however, was found the next morning asleep on his knees, hands burned black where the molten wax had dripped. The record says simply, he held the memory too tightly. It's a grim story, but the monks tell it fondly, like a campfire legend. They even keep the cracked glass dome in the scriptorium, displayed like a saint's bone. You're told pilgrims once came from miles around to see it, convinced it could cure blindness. The abbey probably made a tidy profit off that rumor. Even holiness needs a funding model. A joke drifts through the candlekeeper's oral tradition. If the light goes out, blame Brother Marcus, he's the only one awake to notice. He smirks when you mention it. They say it with love, he insists. Mostly. The two of you sit on the cold floor, watching the hidden flames dance. You realize that the abbey's faith in light isn't just about God, it's about continuity. These men have built an entire theology around refusing to let the past disappear. Every flicker is an act of rebellion against forgetting. The air in the vault feels warmer now, thick with the scent of burning tallow and devotion. You imagine the centuries compressed here. All those watchful eyes keeping vigil while empires rose and fell outside their walls. And for the first time, the superstition starts to make sense. Maybe the world really does end whenever someone stops remembering. When you climb back up the stairs, the night above feels colder, emptier. The abbey sleeps. Only the faint glow from hidden windows tells you the vigil continues. Somewhere deep in the stone belly of the monastery, flames whisper and breathe, keeping their silent promise. And you can't help thinking, if one went out right now, would you even know? Or would the darkness simply fold over the world? By dawn, the abbey is misted in pale gold, and you're walking alongside Brother Marcus through the frost-cracked fields outside the walls. The air is sharp with winter, and the monks' robes flap like dull wings in the wind. You've been warned. Today, you'll see how candle-keeping extends beyond stone and chant. The sacred flame travels with pilgrims, through marketplaces, across bridges, carried like a secret heartbeat of devotion. Marcus lifts a small lantern. Inside, a candle burns with steady resolve, untouched by the chill. This flame comes from the abbey, he says. It's meant to be shared, but not too freely. The world is full of careless hands. You realize immediately that he isn't exaggerating. The flame is the same one that lives in the sanctum. One spark could become legend. One misstep could turn holy fire into ordinary soot. Pilgrims gather along the dirt road, their eyes wide at the sight of the traveling candle. One woman, clutching a wooden rosary, bends to kiss the glass. Another boy tugs at his mother's sleeve, asking if this candle will show angels. Marcus explains that pilgrims once believed carrying a fragment of the abbey's flame could heal the sick, reveal visions, or even guard them from storms at sea. You wonder if any of it is true, but the candle doesn't flicker, and somehow that makes the miracle feel plausible. Historians still argue whether medieval holy fires were ever empirically miraculous or just symbols of faith amplified by rumor and storytelling. Either way, they were powerful. Kings and merchants alike coveted tiny cinders wrapped in cloth, willing to pay fortunes for a chance to touch a flicker of eternity. You find yourself craning forward, almost expecting the candle to whisper its secrets. Marcus warns you of a darker side: theft. Candles were stolen by those greedy for miracles or profit. Some pilgrims tried to smuggle sparks back home, only to have them go out mid-journey. The abbey had a code: recover or replace the flame immediately, or face spiritual disgrace. One particularly cunning thief, he says, hid a flame inside a loaf of bread, hoping the monks would mistake the candle for a baked offering. They didn't. They traced soot in the crumb like detectives tracing fingerprints. You follow Marcus to a makeshift pilgrim hostel, where monks and travelers huddle under straw mats and woolen blankets. Candles flicker on every surface, a patchwork of life and devotion. You watch a family use the flame to light their breakfast fire, murmuring prayers while the light touches each bowl of porridge. It feels intimate, almost absurdly domestic, to witness holiness in something so mundane. The monks chant as the pilgrims eat, a quiet murmur threading through the room like smoke curling upward. Each candle reflects in someone's eye, doubling the number of tiny lights. Marcus says these traveling flames are also teaching tools. They show pilgrims patience, attention, and care. You almost snort at the thought of patience, imagining a toddler trying to carry a candle without tipping it. At midday, you arrive at a riverside bridge. The abbey's flame is set in a small iron brazier. Marcus explains that the river journey is symbolic. The flame passes through uncertainty, just as souls navigate the currents of life. A sudden gust makes the candle flare. You instinctively cup your hands around it. Marcus chuckles. Every wind tests us, he says. Even a minor breeze can feel like apocalypse when you are guarding memory itself. One pilgrim asks if she may take a spark home. Marcus hesitates, then carefully splits a tiny wick from the larger candle, letting her light a small taper. You notice how attentive he is, how deliberate. He's teaching her that to guard something sacred requires presence and care, not just possession. The act of giving doesn't weaken the flame. It transforms it. You see the economics of holy fire firsthand. Merchants offer coins for wax, pilgrims exchange goods for blessings. Candle keepers move between devotion and negotiation, a blend of spiritual and practical survival. Wax is heavy, candles are fragile, but the flame, the thing they cherish, is intangible, yet everyone senses its value. A single spark can inspire awe, fear, or loyalty. As the sun lowers, Marcus leads you to a small chapel in a nearby village. Here, the traveling flame is placed on a simple altar. Villagers kneel, hands lifted, faces aglow. You notice some touch the candle gingerly, others press their foreheads against the glass. Every flicker seems to carry their prayers upward. It's hard not to believe in miracles in this moment. He tells you about another pilgrim tradition, carrying a candle in silence for a mile, never looking back, as a sign of penance and remembrance. The flame's survival depends on concentration, trust, and gentle care. You imagine doing it yourself, footsteps echoing in empty lanes, wind tugging at your cloak. One wrong move, and the effort is lost. It's a test of discipline, patience, and faith, qualities you've seen in the Abbey but never fully appreciated. By nightfall, you return to the Abbey, the candles safely back in Marcus's hands. You realize that every pilgrim encounter, every stolen spark, every careful hand that balances flame against wind is part of a living tradition. The candle doesn't just illuminate, they carry human memory, devotion, hope. And as you step into the Abbey's shadowed corridors, you begin to understand that this network of traveling lights forms an invisible chain linking centuries together. Even in the quiet of your own mind, the lesson lingers. Memory and care can travel farther than stone walls. The sacred flame, once confined to a single room, now threads through villages, rivers, markets, and hearts, proving that even a tiny spark can outlast kingdoms. Centuries pass in a blur of stone and smoke, and suddenly you find yourself standing among the ruins of the Abbey. The walls are crumbling, ivy crawling over the arches, and the wind carries the hollow echo of footsteps that haven't walked here in decades. Yet if you look closely, you can still see traces of the candlekeeper's devotion. Scorched stone where wicks once touched, hollowed niches where wax once pooled, faint trails of soot marking ancient processions. You realize that the memory of the flame has outlasted even the monks themselves. You wander through the empty nave, imagining the rhythmic sway of candles across centuries. You can almost hear the chant, the soft, measured Latin murmurs rising like smoke, winding through the rafters, brushing against your ears. Even in decay, the Abbey seems alive with past care. Every melted pool of wax tells a story. A novice fumbling with a taper, a brother praying beside the Memoria Dei, a traveling flame brought back by pilgrims whose names are long forgotten. Historians still argue whether any of the original relics of the candle keepers survived the Reformation and centuries of neglect. Some believe every trace of the holy flame vanished by the 17th century. Others claim embers were secreted into private chapels and passed down through generations, their memory living in whispered legend rather than visible fire. You stand among the ruins and understand how both views could be true. The flame may have physically gone, yet it endures in human ritual and imagination. You move to the courtyard and notice faint impressions of old stone paths, the patterns where lanterns were set in careful geometric arrays. You kneel and imagine light dancing along these lines, footsteps tracing rituals that measured time not in hours but in inches of wax. Somewhere nearby, rain drizzles over a half-collapsed roof, sending tiny rivulets down like tears of memory. You cup your hands as if holding an invisible flame. There's a curious fringe belief among local villagers that when the wind moves through the ruins just right, it carries the scent of beeswax and burnt wicks. Some claim it's the Abbey reminding them to remember. You breathe in the imagined perfume, and for a moment you swear you feel warmth against your palms, as if the flame had never left at all. You notice the small modern candles people have left behind, on windowsills, in quiet corners, birthday candles, votive lights, memorial tapers. Each one seems like an echo of the keeper's devotion, a flicker that survived the destruction of centuries. Even your phone screen glows with reminders and notes. It's strange to think that the habit of lighting something, anything, in darkness is the distant legacy of these monks. You reflect on the absurdity and beauty of it. Men living in stone halls, obsessed with a flame that could vanish at the slightest mistake. Yet somehow, their faith outlived them. Even as the abbey crumbles, the philosophy endures. That memory, hope, and devotion are fragile but transmissible. Every candle you light now, whether in ritual or birthday whim, carries the DNA of their vigilance. And as the sun dips behind the ruins, painting the stone a soft amber, you realize that the flame within you, your attention, your memory, your small acts of care, is the true inheritance of the candle keepers. The fire may have gone from the abbey, but it has seated itself in every flicker of human remembrance. You stand for a long time, letting the silence settle, letting the amber light fill your eyes. You carry it with you, even when you leave. Now, let's slow down completely. You sit on the cold stone, back against crumbling walls, and exhale, letting the tension of centuries of firekeeping melt away. The wind brushes through the ruins like a gentle hand, carrying the faint scent of beeswax, damp stone, and moss. The distant echo of imagined chants lingers, soft as a memory, but you don't need to chase it.